Hello, I'm Gregory REAMAN from the Oncology Center of Excellence at the FDA. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the early experience of the Race for Children Act and its impact on early initiation of pediatric investigations. Just my standard disclaimer, what I'm presenting here is essentially my opinion and not necessarily reflect the official position of the Food and Drug Administration. As we all know, pediatric oncology drug development is challenged. Several years ago, the pediatric subcommittee of the Oncologic Drugs Advisory Committee developed a consensus statement that drug development for children should generally be coordinated with oncology drug development for adults as part of an overall drug development plan. And as you can all imagine, except in very rare circumstances, that has rarely been the situation. Drug development for children and adolescents in cancer widely leverages adult drug discovery and development, limited opportunities for extrapolation, and very little preclinical testing in pediatric tumor models. There's been extensive delays in initial pediatric evaluation, and this has truly been the greatest challenge. And the impact of existing legislative initiatives in the US, the Pediatric Research Equity Act and the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, which support drug development, have really been markedly less obvious in oncology than in other clinical areas. The whole cancer drug development paradigm in general has changed in that genomic and proteomic profiling of human cancers has resulted in identification of highly specific targeted agents. Approvals have been based on trial results of biomarker-enriched patient populations with large treatment effects demonstrated in studies, which have given rise really to the concept of precision cancer medicine, which has been transformative in a number of adult diseases and is translated now into tissue or histology agnostic development, which I think can provide expanded opportunities for childhood cancer. So the Race for Children Act was incorporated as part of the FDA Reauthorization Act in August of 2017. It went into full effect in August of 2020, and it essentially amends the Pediatric Research Equity Act and requires evaluation of new targeted drugs and biologics intended for treatment of adult cancers, but directed at a target that's substantially relevant to the growth or progression of a pediatric cancer to be investigated when the subject of an initial new drug application. This statute describes molecularly targeted pediatric cancer investigations. These are essentially phase 1b studies with data on dosing, signal of activity, and tolerability. And these agreed initial pediatric study plans must accompany or precede the submission of an application for a new drug to the FDA. And importantly, the amendment eliminates the orphan exemption for pediatric development. There was a requirement for the FDI to work with the NCI and develop a list of relevant and non-relevant molecular targets. These lists are posted on the FDA website at the address demonstrated here. We've been working with the NCI and the Children's Cancer Data Initiative and the Molecular Targets Platform to develop a computable format for this based on specific gene identifiers, and working with internal and external constituents to assure a successful implementation. We were also required to publish a guidance, and the final guidance was published last year, and the address is listed here. There was also a requirement for early advice meetings, which were to focus on clarifying initial pediatric study plan requirements. These are to be held within 30 days of request, so like type A meetings. Briefing documents with questions are required. We have an internal meeting with the respective review division, provide written responses, and we've had quite a number of these since the program started several years ago. We've actually had 28 Type F or early advice meetings for 28 distinct new active ingredients or specific new drugs, 18 for solid tumor indications and 10 for adult hematologic indications as demonstrated here. Just to provide some idea of the number of agreed IPSPs since the law went into full effect in August of 2020 through the most recent period, the end of January of this year. There have been agreed IPSPs reviewed by our internal review committee for 26 new molecular entities. These are original applications, so not any supplemental applications. 8 of these products were directed at relevant molecular targets, non-relevant molecular targets and led to full waivers automatically. And 18 to relevant molecular targets. And in 12 situations, there were pediatric studies that were committed to. A number of deferrals for primarily given that the applications for the adult indication were ready to be submitted. And there was an expectation that study results of the pediatric investigations would lag considerably. A number of partial waivers for particular or specific age groups, generally newborns or children less than a year of age. And a number of full waivers, and these were primarily for investigations of same-in-class agents, notably a significant number of PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors. But just to demonstrate the impact, this slide just shows the number of approved new cancer drugs for the periods 2018 through the last calendar year. And you can see there is some mild variation in the number of new agents, new drugs that are approved by the agency, but it's a relatively stable figure. A significant number of these products are targeted agents where the molecular target to which the product is directed does appear to have relevance, or there's certainly literature data to support that the target is relevant for one or more pediatric cancers. And that is represented by the red bar. And the green bar demonstrates that there are commitments to, or there are already studies, pediatric studies in progress for those drugs that are directed at relevant molecular targets. So you can see that there has been a significant increase in the past year, with 83% of those new molecular entities directed at relevant molecular targets for which there is a commitment that will be part of a post-marketing agreement or post-marketing requirement for a pediatric investigation, or in some of these cases, pediatric studies are already in progress. So I believe that there's a promising trend for commitment to early pediatric studies, which was the primary intent of this piece of legislation. Definitive pediatric development will remain voluntary and will be hopefully accomplished primarily through the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act. The impact of the Race for Children Act does require some regulatory flexibility on the part of the agency with innovation in study design, looking at using platform trials, synthetic controls, Bayesian adaptive designs, and relaxing type 1 errors for randomized clinical trials, given the sample size constraints that are often seen, almost always seen, with pediatric clinical trials. And obviously, global collaboration and international clinical trials and regulatory alignment are critical. Speaking of global alignment and the need for international trials, as part of the recent AAADB workshop held in September of this past year, there was a session on developing a global pediatric neuro-oncology network. This was a multi-stakeholder session with investigators, patient advocates, regulators, and individuals from industry. It's pertinent that the focus was on neuro-oncology as brain tumors now cause the majority of childhood cancer deaths. So developing new drugs for brain tumors is clearly a way to address a critical unmet clinical need. There are a number of established networks in the United States and the EU, the Children's Oncology Group, the Pediatric Brain Tumor Consortium, SIOP Europe, the Pediatric Neuro-Oncology Consortium, and a number of others. And we also heard of the progress of developing regional networks in India, one focused at the Tata Memorial Hospital in Mumbai, and another at the Apollo Hospital in Chennai. And there was clearly industry interest and a commitment to try and facilitate this program. So some of the challenges were really pretty straightforward, really defining the scope and the breadth of outreach, clarification of objectives and mission of an international or global clinical trial network to improve standard of care, to focus on the development and perhaps registration or approval, marketing authorization of new cancer therapies. Obviously, there were challenges because of the diverse access to core diagnostic and therapeutic capabilities as far as neurosurgical procedures, pathology, genomic sequencing, and radiation therapy. Also problematic access to essential and investigational medicines. And I think the situation is now increasingly challenged as what were multiple brain tumor histologies are now further subdivided among specific genomic subtypes and classes, which really requires another level of pathology and genomic expertise. The development of complementary diagnostics or companion diagnostics, and testing for biomarker-directed studies, the need for biopsies and perhaps even on therapy biopsies, the requirement for centralized data capture and management of data, data sharing, central pathology and imaging review, and obviously cultural and social barriers to care and the impact on research. So we actually heard from the experience in Africa of abandonment of therapy because of the fact that families cannot travel to specialized treatment centers, and more importantly, the absence of even essential chemotherapy agents in some parts of that continent. So there are obviously complementary efforts to advance global collaboration that I just want to mention briefly here. The Accelerate platform, a multi-stakeholder platform based in Belgium, has an international collaboration working group addressing similar issues. The International Society of Pediatric Oncology has just launched its PARC program, a program for advancing research capacity for low-income and middle-income countries. This is linked to SIOP's role in the World Health Organization Global Initiative on Childhood Cancer to improve research to advance cure rates. So the goals here are really building capacity, creating or helping to create a research, a clinical trial infrastructure, addressing access issues, expanding enrollment on clinical trials, even required for approval and marketing authorization in all parts of the world of new cancer drugs for children. So it would appear to me that neuro-oncology, given the unmet need that exists in children with brain tumors, would be the perfect place to begin such an initiative. I believe this is the end of my formal presentation, and I look forward to some discussion and questions following. Thanks very much.